Hi everyone, I'm Katie, and we're in the Deadline studio with the directors of The Dark Wizard. Thanks for being here, you guys.
Thank you for
Thank you,
having
Katie.
Of
us.
course. Can you first just tell me about being interested in Dean Potter and, wanting to explore his kind of maybe complicated life?
Yeah, well, we knew Dean Potter
Mhm.
from we'd filmed with him, we climbed with him, and so he's always been like a fascinating figure and just a larger than life character. And so over the last 10 years, we've really been conceiving this project, and then we finally started working on it about 3 years ago and brought it all together. And yeah, he's just he's kind of our generation, and which is I think people just had like more complex relationships with like mental health, and you kind of kept that stuff bottled up and maybe expressed in some outrageous manifestations. And I think Dean was just he's just this fascinating larger than life character who did some truly amazing things. Yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot of conversation right now about this exact topic because Alex Honnold is making so many, waves with his, feats. And I'm curious what it's been like for you as documentary filmmakers who have been making documentaries about the subject for a very long time to kind of see that now enter the public zeitgeist in that way with Alex, and like you're grappling with the same issues as maybe the world is too.
Wait, what kind of issues?
Just of what exactly what you were talking about, of just like people who maybe are having that complicated relationship with their mental health, and it can manifest in some like interesting ways.
Yeah. Well, so we've been also working with Alex Honnold for a really long time. I think Pete and I have been filming with him before anybody knew who he was. What's interesting about Alex, and maybe I'll leave the mental health thing aside a little bit, but for him, but what's really interesting from just like a kind of a brain standpoint is that Alex is just this preternaturally uh, unafraid human being. And he always had, and that's what sort of, and when we first filmed with Alex, it was just astonishing. I mean, he would be hanging from some steep rock face without a rope, and we'd all be like freaking out and filming, being like, oh, and he would just be like joking with us or telling us like, you want this angle or what, like, hey. Dean Potter, totally different story. Dean was deeply human and had all of the fear that you would think a human would have when their life is on the line like that. And for Dean, that kind of defined him, and that was like his quest, was to confront that fear, experience it, and per the mental health thing, Dean really did struggle with like some really severe undiagnosed, untreated mental health stuff, and that he would kind of just refer to as his darkness or his demons. And that quest for fear and that confronting that fear, and then the sort of release and the sort of momentary peace that he would achieve, was the one thing that like made him feel okay, that like made him gave him reprieve from those demons. And it's a hell of a way to do it.
What did you, as people who knew him, come to understand about him better through the process of making the documentary?
I think, yeah, no, in real life, Dean is such a self-assured person. He's so confident. He's like 6'6", so he's really intimidating. And he has that like silverback monkey presence. And everyone, you kind of trust and believe in him. And then in the film, we had access to his journals. We had access to all this behind the scene footage and just talking, really intimately with his like closest friends, and just realizing how much he struggled and how insecure he was and how much he questioned his path, and like constantly trying to figure out, am I doing the right thing? Will anyone ever love me? Am I gonna die? Like all these questions. And so his vulnerability, like, which I never saw it because he kind of had a hard shell in person. And I think putting the whole story together, he's this like really vulnerable person in a way that made me like want to be like, oh, Dean.
Yeah, made us love him more.
Were there any climbs that he had done that you viewed differently or learned something about, or were excited to re-explore?
That's an
I think
interesting
I think
question.
China, probably.
Yeah, like, because
It's not a climb.
we experienced a lot of the sort of behind the scenes things that were going on with these legendary Dean Potter feats that would come out in the film, look incredibly well executed and inspirational. The folks that filmed with Dean knew that, like, leading up to these events was this intense roller coaster of psychodrama because of that fear and that mental health stuff that Dean was coping with. It would just build into this incredibly tense, sort of like ball of stress leading up to these things. And anyone who's like trying to like work with him or film with him, I remember Bullwinkle, his close friend, like described it as just make sure he doesn't look at you. Just don't, if he looks at you, it's going to be bad. But so, and then that would all be kind of released in the end. But yeah, I mean, we were aware that Dean, in episode 3, Dean has this trip to China to film this live event. I don't think you guys have seen it yet because it hasn't been released yet. And Bullwinkle, his buddy, went there with him, and I had just kind of saw, footage, amazing. He did this amazing thing, and just like, even just like the stuff that was captured on the live and on his live audio and the sort of in the live event that you don't sort of hear and broadcast and stuff is just like, whoa, there was a lot of crazy, dark stuff going on.
How do you, as directors, something I always think about, I thought about this watching Free Solo. I thought about it when I watched the Taipei 101 climb. Uh, how do you think about the relationship of the public wanting to witness somebody try to accomplish something like that, knowing what the consequences could be? And the idea that in order to even document that it happened, you have to have people there to witness it and be filming it and taking photos, who would potentially be exposed to whatever trauma might come from, what could happen.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting watching because as the public watching, that this is part performance. Or as a cameraman, you're like, okay, he's doing this thing and he's obviously doing it for his reason and it's his vision, but it's a performance. And I think you go through the same thing he goes through. If he succeeds, it's the most incredible thing to be a part of. A lot of his friends, and we've experienced that, like, I was part of something really big. If he fails, you, I think, would feel like you have some responsibility as part of that. I mean, luckily we've never been in that situation, but I can't imagine how that would feel, knowing that a part of what he's doing is performance for the public or for the camera.
Yeah, and Free Solo, the cameramen, I think they set the cameras up and they literally like walk away so they don't have to witness it. So I've always just thought it was so interesting. I'm curious, my last question for you is, through the process of making this documentary, how has it shaped your relationship with climbing personally as climbers and just the reverence for that sport?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, for me, in recent years, I've have a couple young children. I'm definitely a lot softer than I was when we were running around with Dean, climbing and filming this stuff. And but I have just, kind of, it has awoken in me a kind of a sort of a new love for pushing my own little limits here and there. And I renewed my my membership to the climbing gym.
We a lot of we're in our early 50s now. A lot of our friends are like, who test screen this stuff with us, our dads and stuff too. And after our screenings, it's always like, man, it was so crazy back then. We like didn't have like medication and therapy. We just like did crazy shit, and it's kind of like brought me back to that era. So I've enjoyed that.
That's so funny. Well, but you can still take calculated risk sometimes to maybe feed the adrenaline, the crave for adrenaline. But anyways, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.